Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Intentional Conversations podcast. We're so excited that you're here with us today. We do not take it lightly when people show up to be a part of our community. It's your way of letting us know that you see value in the time that we spend together in deepening your knowledge and your understanding, and we are so incredibly grateful. We're just going to give it a moment or two for people to get settled into this virtual learning experience and build up critical mass. If you would, please go to the chat. Let us know where you are joining the conversation from. It is always a treat to us to be able to see the different geographies that are represented among our community, not only those within the U.S., but also even those visitors who join us outside of the U.S. I am Dr. Nika White, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. Shout out to the NWC team. And we are delighted to spend this hour with you. If you're connecting with us for the first time, Intentional Conversations is all about intersecting topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, justice, accessibility, all of the things, right, that fall under the main umbrella of DEI, and intersecting it with leadership and business. We're celebrating 5 years here at NWC in terms of offering intentional conversations. Yay, 5 for us. And we're super excited about that milestone. And let's let the conversations begin. If you are here with us today and you desire for this community to connect with you beyond this hour of time, then please go to the chat and share your LinkedIn information. This allows us to know that you're willing for us to reach out and be connected beyond this hour. My team is going to share my LinkedIn information into the chat, and I certainly welcome being in community with each of you on that platform. I also want you to know that if you're here a part of our Zoom community, we love to see smiling faces. And so if that's you, then have those cameras on. If not, and you're here multitasking or in a different capacity, maybe where you're just kind of listening in from auditory capacity, then we are delighted nonetheless, and we are so glad you are here. At NWC, we truly value disability inclusion, and as a result, we have enabled closed caption for those who may need it today. So certainly be aware of that. Once again, welcome to Intentional Conversations podcast, and let the conversations begin. Enjoy the show. Let the conversations begin, and indeed, we're about to do that. Once again, I'm Dr. Nika White. I am your host of Intentional Conversations. And by the way, this is our vodcast. We do extract the audio from every single week of our show, and we make it available in podcast capacity so that for anywhere you like to get your podcast content, you also have the opportunity to stay connected to the content that we offer on this show. And I want you to know that we're still in the month of February, so it is Black History Month, and I want to make sure we're all leaning into as many opportunities as possible to strengthen our knowledge and understanding of the remarkable contributions that the Black Americans have made to our country. Black history is American history, and we not only celebrate just in this month of February, but all year long. I also want you to be aware that the paperback version of my book, Inclusion Uncomplicated, A Transformative Guide to Simplify DEI, released last month in January. And I'm so excited for all of you to grab a copy if you have not already. My book, baby, is 2 years old, and I have been blessed by all of the support from so many of you who have found this as a valuable tool. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want you to know that at NWC, we have a multitude of opportunities where we like to make sure we're deepening people's knowledge and understanding of all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as such, one of the resources we like to socialize with our community would be the 4 courses that are available on LinkedIn Learning that I have facilitated by serving as a LinkedIn Learning instructor. So I hope you will take advantage of these 4 courses and share them out with those in your network who you think would also gain value from being exposed to the content. Boundless. This is our newest program. It's a women's community of well-being, empowerment, and leadership, a very transformative experience that helps to empower women of color through all the different circumstances that they're having to navigate right now. And we do it in a very meaningful way, curated experiences that can confidently help navigate our growth journeys, and in a protected space where we feel appreciated, valued, and we're able to lean on each other, empower each other, and certainly grow in our leadership ability. So we're going going to place into the chat a link to interest meetings that are coming up for you to join to learn more. We would love to have you a part of our Boundless cohort community. Another offering at NWC is Storytelling Cultural Framework. We believe in storytelling around here. We know the power of storytelling to help create change and to build bridges of division and to deepen empathy and compassion. And all of those things really help to lead to a healthy workplace culture. So if you are interested in being able to bring this methodology and framework to the confines of your organization's DNA, then let us know. We'll share a link into the chat, and we welcome conversations with you further about our storytelling cultural framework. Now, I said that we are Yay 5. This is our 5th year, and we are doing something really special. In addition to our inclusion or intentional conversations, a podcast that we offer every single week, we are also offering now special opportunity once a quarter where we do what we refer to as a reunion episode. And so the first one is scheduled for February the 24th coming up. Yes, just later this week. There's still time to register. It's a free event. We have an incredible lineup of amazing women who are doing some brilliant work into this space of leadership, DEI, workplace culture, and I cannot wait for you to hear from them. And so please join us, mark your calendar, share it out. It is going to be a conversation you do not want to miss. Now, it does me great pleasure to introduce our guest co-host for today. And if you've been a part of our community, you know that I always like to read the credentials, the accolades, the bios, because it's important to me that you understand the experience in which our guest co-hosts show up to the conversation with. So today will be no different. I am delighted for you all to hear from our guest co-host, Dr. Adriane Johnson-Williams. She is the founder and principal of Standpoint Consulting, a Memphis, Tennessee-based certified Black woman-owned consulting firm dedicated to helping leaders create organizations ready to maximize their effectiveness and the benefits of diversity to achieve results. Her education and background in organizational dynamics are supported by her unapologetic, boots-on-the-ground approach to getting things done. In addition to being the founder and principal of Standpoint Consulting, she hosts the Equitable podcast series. Look forward to learning more about that. In the series, Johnson-Williams and her expert guests discuss how to clearly define equity and ways to reduce or eliminate the existence of inequities. Dr. Johnson-Williams is the author of Not Your Father's Capitalism, What Race Equity Asks of U.S. Business Leaders. In the book, Dr. Johnson-Williams details effective strategies for pursuing diversity, inclusion, race equity, and embracing organizational change. She holds a PhD in Educational Policy Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a Master of Education in Secondary Education from George Washington University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and French from Wesley College. Johnson-Williams enjoys an impactful career serving many organizations to increase access to resources and be more effective in serving their clients and populations. You know what to do now, podcast community. Find those emojis, those reactions, those words of affirmation. Go to the chat. Let's let our guest co-host, Adriane Johnson-Williams, know how much we appreciate her being here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can bring her into the spotlight. Going to put you to the spotlight now. And we're just so grateful. Now, before I release you, Dr. Adriane, to greet this audience in your own way, we have a tradition here at NWC on our podcast, and that is to ask that our welcomed host to take a moment to share with us something that we would not know about you from reading and hearing your bio, which we've just done, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome, 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 and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a great intro. I'm thinking, what would you know? What wouldn't you know, actually? I wanted to be a Broadway performer when I was in the middle
Oh,
school.
love
I
it.
wanted to be on Broadway. I'm very loud and I'm very dramatic and I love musicals. So that's something that people would know about me. I think the other
Yes.
thing that people probably would know about me is that even though I show up and I'm very kind of ebullient when I'm out in the world, I'm a very strong introvert. So once I show
Um,
up and I do what I'm here to do, I then have to go take a nap.
Oh, you know what, Dr. Adriane, we are aligned there because I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, I do refer to myself as an ambivert because I am great on stages. I am great presenting, and I even can find myself being right in the center of the social life. But
Mhm.
I have to recharge afterwards, or
Yeah.
I am no good. And
Mhm.
so I am right there with you, right there with you. I'm going to also just take notice of, as you were talking about yourself, you use words like loud and did you say dramatic? I think
Ebullient, dramatic, yes.
yes, and I love, love, love the fact that unapologetically you are able to use those words to describe yourself and do
Yes.
it with such pride
Mhm.
because it shows us that we as Black women should feel pride in taking up space
Yes.
in the authentic ways in which we exist
Mhm, mhm.
without feeling bad about it or like we need to kind of, shrink back.
Right.
And so I took notice of that. And I just wanted to
Mhm.
bring that to this audience's attention. That was beautifully done. So
Thank
thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you. And the Broadway kind of interest, that's an interesting tidbit.
Mhm.
Do you find yourself dabbling at all? I mean, I know it's not something that you actually centered as a career path, but
Well, no. After middle school, when I was in every performing group known to mankind, I stopped doing it. But I do love karaoke, and you better believe that when Wicked came out, I was right there front and center. And when you could buy it, I have bought it. I have sung along here in the house. I love it. I just love it.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. I haven't seen Wicked yet, by the way. It's definitely on my list. And I know there's probably some folks out there saying, shame, shame, shame. And I know it's on my list, though. It's on my list. Okay, I want to jump right in because we have a limited amount of time. And I realize that we're going to quickly get to the end and feel like, oh, where did the time go? So I want to
Mhm.
maximize the time that we have. And by the way, I also want to acknowledge our LinkedIn Live audience. Not only do we have a Zoom community that shows up live, but we also have folks that will join us on LinkedIn Live. And so I want to give a shout out to those individuals and we have not forgotten about you. If you hear something and you have questions or expressions and sentiments you want to share, go to the comment section. My team is watching that and bringing it over so that the Zoom community and the LinkedIn Live community can be connected. So let's hear about your background. I want to understand what was your journey and what inspired you to launch your consultancy called Standpoint Consulting. And if there's some uniqueness about the name, would love to hear that too.
Yes. So standpoint consulting, the name comes from standpoint theory, which is part of feminist theory. I particularly lean into the Black feminist theory version of it. The idea is that everyone has a perspective, and when we define problems and come up with solutions, if we're not paying attention to the perspectives of the people who are most impacted by a problem, then we're missing something very important.
Oh,
And so we really
yeah.
need to think about who the people are we're trying to support, who are the people we really want to, make successful, or who want to be
Mhm.
successful, make themselves successful, quite frankly, who have the capacity and the knowledge and wisdom to solve their own problems, but don't necessarily have access to the power and resources to do it. Their standpoint matters.
Absolutely, it matters. And you articulated that so beautifully. One of the things that I often say is that we need to stop assuming that we know what certain marginalized, disenfranchised, underserved populations need and start asking questions to
Yes.
lead us to how in which we're going to help solve for those challenges. And so
Mhm.
sometimes asking, what does support look like for you? And
Mhm.
ending it with, in this moment, is
Yes,
really critical because it can change. And I
exactly.
think that's one of the center points of this whole notion of being an accomplice or an ally is doing
Yes.
it with the communities in which you're trying to stand and support us. So I love the theory behind Standpoint, the name, the
Yeah.
theories, and the fact that that's how you landed on the name for your
Yeah.
consultancy.
And it's the same whether you're talking about the nonprofit sector and social supports or social change as it is when you're talking about
Mm,
for-profit environments, right? So corporations are doing all sorts of work in communities, around communities. There's corporate philanthropy, and then, quite frankly, there are the employees. Um,
right.
People are the ones that produce your profits ultimately. And so, if you're paying
Yes.
attention to who those people are and what's going to make their lives better, then you're going to reap the benefits of that in your bottom line. And so
Yeah.
this idea of standpoint really does cross all sorts of boundaries in terms of organizational governance, kind of your profit motive, your social justice motive. It applies to everything.
Everything. No,
Yeah.
well stated. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought how this is showing up within the confines of different organizations. And you're right, many organizations are very socially conscious. They have a lot of social impact commitments and work that they are attached to. And not only because they see it as good for the brand reputation and the right thing to do as a brand citizen, but also to your point, because it gives the employees something meaningful that they are associating themselves with that makes them feel a sense of pride in being a
Yeah.
part of those organizations, whether it's different volunteer efforts or just knowing that they are part of an organization that cares, that are very conscious about the community, right? And so, loving all of that. So, let's talk about how your firm has been inspiring, concepts and strategies that center on lived experiences and organizational improvement efforts. Help us to
Yeah.
really understand what that looks like in practice in terms of how you work with your clientele.
Yes. So clients clearly, my clients have other human beings that are involved in their work, right? So I
Mhm.
don't work in or with clients who only work with, machines or
Right.
computers. There are human beings involved.
Right.
And when human beings are involved, it's important that we think about who those people are and what role they play in producing outcomes. We say that we do center results, right? So anytime you take up any sort of endeavor, in your business, in your organization, you have a vision. You have results
Yes.
that you're trying to seek. The challenge is often when we think about visioning, when we think about what our results are, we can be very internal thinking. We can say that our
Yeah.
vision for my company is X, or my vision for my organization is that my
Yeah.
organization be X. But that's so internal, and it doesn't actually consider all of the human beings or the core group of human beings who are really at the center of your work. So, my vision for Standpoint Consulting is about the employees of all of the clients that we might have. Our vision is that those employees are treated like human beings and are respected and have no barriers to their ability to progress that are associated in any way with their identity, right? That's my vision for Standpoint. And so
Right.
I encourage clients to say, yes, what's your vision for your company? But what do you want your company or your organization to do for people? How do you think
Mm.
about your vision in that way so that when you are putting together your strategies are really human centered? And even operational strategies, kind of fundraising strategies, all sorts of strategies we might have can shift when we think about them in the context of the people who are at the heart of our work.
Yeah, I love the connection point between the human-centered approach and how it needs to be that mindset and philosophy needs to be embedded across all areas of
Mhm.
operations. It becomes part of the DNA of
Yes.
how an organization shows up, operates,
Mhm.
all the things, right?
Mhm.
And I love what you said about as you're developing that vision. What do you want the people to do for people?
Mhm.
And I would imagine that sometimes there are people on the receiving end of hearing that message,
Mhm.
and they're thinking, well, I'm a founder, I'm a business owner, business leader. I just want people with warm bodies to show up and do the work and get the work done.
Right.
I'm not
Right.
concerned about all this other stuff. They need to go and
Mhm.
volunteer in external efforts
Mhm.
if that's what they're looking for. But right now, we
Mhm.
have widgets. We need the widgets to be made, and that's all I care about. When you
Mhm.
have people that are so firm in that type of mindset,
Mhm.
what do you find to be the biggest, I guess, challenges they end up running into?
I think oddly it's the kind of black box thinking that we have around we need this output, so if we get these people to do this thing, it will happen.
Yeah.
And what I try to do is help people to really break it down and look at all the steps in between. So, what are the things that you think these people need to do? What do these people need to do to get you to this outcome? And what does that take? How much, time do they need? How much rest do they need? What resources do they need? What motivations do they need? And what comes out of it is this understanding that people, human beings, are not machines.
They're not machines. Yes, yes. There is a reason that human comes before resources, right? But I
Yes.
think oftentimes in our mindset, the way in which we
Mhm,
behave is we
mhm.
always put the resource portion before the
Yes,
human, and it
yes.
doesn't work that way. So I
Mhm,
am totally aligned with you. And I think a lot of it too has to do with organizations being very forthcoming and with clarity around their core values, right?
mhm,
Because that is
mhm,
where I think it gives people the ability to then assess, do my core values values align with the core values of this organization.
Right.
And unfortunately, too often we find people that are just in need of a check, an income,
Mhm.
their livelihood. And so there may not be clear alignment, but what we
Mhm.
find is that it ends up compromising the work experience, right?
Yes.
And I think it's a disservice to the organization as well as to the
Mhm.
individuals. And so I am all for more intentionality of helping people to assess their core values along with the core values of the organizations in which
Mhm.
they are working with and for.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to move now and I want to talk about senior leaders in organizations and their need to be upskilled around creating and maintaining equitable workplace experiences. But what I find is that a lot of those senior leaders, while they may have reached the ranks of being a senior leader because they know their craft, they know their trade right, they may not necessarily know how to implement organizational change in a way that really centers equitable practices. And so, talk to us about some of the ways in which you would coach or advise senior leaders who want to create or maintain equitable workplaces and implement organizational change where it needs to occur.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, Dr. Nika, let me tell you, before people can do organizational change, I ask the question of whether they live an equitable life,
Oh, it starts at the personal level.
right?
Yes, we are aligned.
So as a leader, how can you lead something you don't live?
Yes.
How can you support a full respect for all of the humanity that exists across all of the different races, ethnicities, abilities, needs that are in your organization if you live a homogenous life?
Yes.
And I'm
How
not
can you
saying that people have to go out and completely change and upend their lives, but there needs to be awareness of what you can and cannot do, what you are and are not
100%?
capable of. And if you are someone who lives a homogenous life and you have no idea how you're ever going to live any other kind of life, then maybe that means you need to hire people with enough power in your organization who do not live homogenous lives and who you fully empower to do the things that
Yes.
you do. But if you are the most powerful person in an organization and you don't understand at a personal level why having people from all sorts of backgrounds is vital to the well-being of your organization, then it is going to be very hard to lead that effort.
100%. I just want to echo something that you stated, which I think is worth amplifying. How can you lead something you don't live? I mean, that is a mouthful of truth.
Mhm.
And I hope that is resonating with this audience because it's definitely resonating with me. And the importance of knowing what can we do, what can't we do, what won't we do. That's
Mhm.
important.
Mhm.
And I am reminded of the political climate that we find ourselves in right now.
Mhm.
And even in spite of yourself, Dr. Adrian, and myself, and so many other practitioners and champions of this broader work of inclusivity, organizational change, and healthy workplace cultures that center the needs of all types of individuals, how it's being threatened and it's being devalued. And I think about how right now there's a big message that relates to merit, 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 almost to say that if you start to center and think about people across different dimensions of
Mhm.
diversity outside of what many will still continue to refer to as the dominant culture, but we know that majority now is the global majority now
Mhm.
is really shifting and it looks vastly different.
Mhm.
But there's so much focus on merit. What do you say to those individuals that when you present, the context that you just did, they say, well, no, we don't need to be concerned about all these people across different dimensions. We need to just be concerned only solely about merit. What do you
Mhm.
say to that? Because we're hearing it a lot,
My
right?
first question is, how are you defining merit?
That
What's the
part.
definition of merit? And I say that genuinely authentically because when
Yes.
I first left home and went into majority white spaces, one of the
Mm,
first things I realized was that this idea that somehow whiteness equals meritorious was
yes.
completely false. I was shocked by how the fact that like average really is just average. Everybody has averageness in their groups, but how it took me being well above average to even get access to this group of
Yes.
average whiteness.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if we want to talk merit, let's have the conversation about
Let's
merit.
have the
Why is
conversation.
it?
I am
Because
yes.
every Black woman I work with in my environment has better credentials, more experience, more knowledge about the thing, any of their fields, chemistry, best,
Yes.
the people I know are the best. Law
Yes.
people I know are the best, and they're Black women. I mean, so yeah, you want to talk merit? Let's talk merit for real.
Let's have the
Now, but
conversation.
the
Let's talk it
problem
for real,
is,
for real.
yes, but the problem is they're not really saying merit. They're not really talking about merit, um,
100%. They're
right?
hiding behind that. Yeah.
Right. So we
That's
have to
such huge
recognize,
inaccuracy.
yeah, we have to recognize that when it comes to the environment we're in now, we're not going to win the language game, because one of the
Mm,
best tools of autocracy and authoritarianism and all of this is the twisting of language. And I've been saying to folks, my clients, even in the programs I help to lead, trainees, is that what we really need to recognize is now is not necessarily the time to talk about it, but to be about it.
mm.
How do you
Yes.
dig in and do work in an environment where people are trying to play word games?
Yes. Yes, exactly. We're
And then,
not going to win the language war, as you said. So
right.
yeah, let's step out of that fight and
Hmm.
let's try to,
Hmm.
have a level of stick to itness where we feel like we can sustain the work because that's
Right.
what's important. It's just doing the
Mhm.
work.
My
No,
question
I
I am
appreciate that.
asking about all of the kind of corporations and folks putting out
Yeah.
statements, we are doing this, we're not doing this, we're going to shift this. All of that, I get people have to make their statements. My question is, so what does this look like? What are you doing?
Yeah, at the end of the day, what are you doing? What does that look like? You're so right. I know
Mhm,
of another practitioner that has on numerous occasions, especially during this most recent news of all the changes that many
mhm,
organizations are putting in place relative to their
mhm,
DEI
mhm,
commitments, is they're challenging the people that as we are exposed to those who are putting out lists to say, here are the ones who maintain their commitment and here are the ones who have reduced the value or
mhm.
eliminated it. They're saying, don't just take at face value
Yeah.
what those organizations who are waving the flag saying we're still committed are
Mhm,
doing, but let's
mhm.
even go a little bit deeper to make sure that how they have changed or modified what they
Mhm.
consider to be continuing to do the work
Yes.
really is doing the work, right?
And
Let's
conversely, the people who say we're no longer doing these things, what does
yes.
that really mean about what they're
What does that
doing?
mean?
Because they
Yes.
may not be stopping for all we know.
You're
Because
right.
what we know is that when you really focus on diversity, when you're really inclusive, when you're really focused on equity, you make more money. And if there's one thing we can be
Yes.
sure that corporations want to do in this day and age is make
Make
money.
more money.
So let's figure out
100%.
what they're actually doing and not get caught up or kind of pulled out of our piece by statements and,
Yeah.
things that are going
That's
to
a
catch the headlines.
really, really good point to make. And I've heard that before. So it's worth amplifying because you're right. So many of the companies that have quote unquote pulled back, if you really read the fine print,
Mhm,
it really is just a modification. And
mhm,
so I do want us to be careful to not, place such heavy criticism without getting all the facts. Right now, I'm finding that from my observations, media seems to be gravitating more to the doom and gloom stories of those who are
mhm,
pulling out. So they're kind of
mhm.
sensationalizing that message,
Yes.
which is
Mhm,
leading a lot of people just to automatically assume that, many of those brands just are completely kind of doing away with it and they're not even trying to have workarounds in
mhm,
consideration of the current climate. So, really, really valid point. So, Dr. Adrian, you work with a number of companies and you've partnered across the board. And so, I won't necessarily ask you to name any of those companies unless you feel like it's relevant and you're comfortable doing so. But I do want to understand more about the issues that you're helping them overcome,
mhm,
relevant to this broad body of work and
mhm,
expertise that you bring.
mhm. The core issue that I work with leadership teams on is the idea of what does it really mean to be a team, that
Hmm.
institutionalizes equity.
Okay.
Right? So that in these moments like the ones we're in now, when there's pressure to do things, changing what you've done as a team would require disrupting core operations, right?
Yeah.
So if you're really working, first of all, as a team, and you have real understanding of how all of the pieces in an organization work together, and you're weaving in equity principles into the nature of everything you do, then it becomes virtually impossible to back out of it. Because if
Yeah,
it's how you do your work, then backing out of it would require you to stop doing your work, which no one's
absolutely.
going to do. Which is
Yeah.
another kind of element of me working with teams to say, we don't start with the language we use. We start with looking at how do you operate? What are the things that you do on a regular basis? Where
Hmm.
are inequities embedded? How do you rip those out? Right?
Yeah.
And you can figure out how
Yeah.
to talk about it when you're ready to talk about it to the people,
Yeah.
but what are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis to make sure equity is embedded in what you do? And
Yeah.
it's incredibly hard work because it does require personal work. It requires people to be vulnerable as professionals with their colleagues to
Yes,
help
it's
figure out
true.
what you can and what you need help with when somebody else needs to step in, when you need some peer coaching. It requires tight alignment toward a very clear set of results. Um,
Yes.
and ultimately, it means that when things shift, all you have to do, and I say all you have to do, and it's harder said than done. Let's just be
It's more
real.
complex than that.
It's
Yeah,
harder
for
said than
sure.
done, is that when it comes down to things like talking with when your lobbyists are talking to legislators, right? They have to worry about language. They have to figure out how to communicate it, but what you're doing is not going to change.
Yeah, yeah. If I were to think about all the three letters of DEI, and we know there's so many other, letters that go into describing all that that entails. But let's just use DEI. I would venture to say, and I'm wondering if you share these sentiments, that the E, the equity piece, is the most misunderstood, the
Yes.
most complex, and the one that those who devalue
Mhm.
DEI have the biggest issue with. And
Yes.
so I want to understand, Dr. Adrienne, with
Mhm.
this current climate, have you found that you've needed to reimagine maybe some of your approaches in
Mhm.
terms of organizations feeling less inclined to focus
Mhm.
on the equity piece?
Mhm. I'm really fortunate. I don't have I haven't experienced any pushback from any of my clients
That
about
is
me using the
tremendous.
word. What I am supporting clients with is figuring out how to hold both the language they have to use and the work they have to do, right?
Mhm.
So I'm supporting them in letting go of this need to have this purity of language. I've said to people, I was like, you know what? We can call this whatever we want to at this point because again, words don't matter anymore. Now don't have a lot of value. But what we can say is that you can say we're trying to find the best way to maximize our investment in human beings according to what their needs are to be successful. Like you can just say all sorts of words,
Reframe. I love a good
all
reframe.
of
Yeah.
it, like reframe it, but do the work. And I personally have not had any requests to talk about pitch or do anything that I need to do in order to get a contract
Yeah, no,
differently. Um,
that's fortunate, and I'm so glad to hear that. I know that many have not had that same
right,
experience, and it seems like a lot of individuals are and companies are becoming much more emboldened and
yeah,
being confident in saying, "Well, we don't have to worry about that,"
right.
because of what we're seeing in this current climate. But as you said, equity requires so much. The first thing that it requires is choosing to solve for inequities because if we don't get past that
Mhm.
and the need through education and awareness to understand why this is even a conversation of importance, then we're never going to be able to move the needle. And a lot of it is about that change management. So
Yes.
I'm glad to know that you are doing this important work and you're making a difference for so many of the organizations that you are connected with. So I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
And you are the author of Not Your Father's Capitalism.
Mhm.
And I want to understand what is really the premise of the book without giving it completely
Mhm.
away. We will
Mhm.
share into the chat a link to your book so people can check it out, can get it, can learn from you. But what do you believe are the most pressing challenges for U.S. business leaders in pursuing equity? I think you talk about this in your book, Not
Mhm.
Your
Yeah.
Father's
Yeah,
Capitalism.
I do. I talk a little bit about people's understandings or some business leaders' understandings of what the point of their business is in the context of capitalism, which is
Yeah.
profit taking, right? We're here to make money. We
Yeah.
just want to get the profit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the worst case scenario, you want to get the profits regardless of what harm you do to human beings, right?
Hmm.
So, for some folks, that's just true. We have to, otherwise we wouldn't have human rights legislation and we wouldn't have
Right.
this. But the people I'm interested in talking to are the people who are genuinely appalled by the idea that you would think of exploiting human beings to make money, in the most negative sense of exploitation,
Yeah.
but who aren't aware of the ways that their approach to business, to making money, is actually diminishing the people's humanity, right? Because they're
Hmm.
not really taking full advantage of the wealth of human identity, and they're not creating opportunities for themselves, quite frankly, to reap the benefits of the diversity in their pools. So one of the examples I give in the book is this idea that we want to make sure that we're focusing on people's merit and accomplishment, right?
There you
We
go.
get people in, they're going to compete, right? We're going to have real competition. But the reality is, there isn't real competition because you're not making sure that people are able to compete or that people aren't overly privileged, right?
Yes.
I'm very proud of my degrees. I'm incredibly proud of my undergraduate degree. I went to Wellesley College, and we are, some people might call us a cult, but we will pick up the phone and call each other, help each other out, right? And that's
Yeah.
great. But it also means that I can be privileged in a work environment in a way that somebody who didn't go to Wellesley can
Sure.
be disadvantaged.
Sure.
And we think that's fine. And I have to say, it would cost me something in a place to say, could we stop doing that? Right? That
Yeah.
creates inequities. As much as
Yes.
I love that I can call somebody and get to the, I hate a line, right? But if
Yes.
competing, that singular thing is creating an inequity because the types
Yeah.
of schools that people go to where they get the privilege are not the most diverse schools. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that the people who don't go to those schools are less capable. So just that
Right.
one thing, and there's so many of those behaviors that create
Yeah.
inequities. And when I point those out to people, I mean, talk about pearl clutching. They're just oh, right, I've done this.
Yeah.
I have done
Yes.
this,
We
and
all
because we
have.
don't think
Yeah.
anything of it. We don't
We
think anything
don't.
of it.
Yeah. So I think that part of solving for that has a lot to do with how well we can educate and sensitize people to acknowledging their own sources of power
Mhm,
and privilege, and
mhm,
then recognizing the responsibility to use it honorably.
mhm.
There's nothing wrong with you calling on folks from Wesley to be able to
Yeah,
get whatever you want,
yeah,
but are you also leveraging that power and that
right.
privilege to create and open doors for others? I think is
Mhm.
part of what we
Yeah.
also need to make sure we are socializing to the
Mhm,
masses,
mhm.
because in and of itself, privilege and power is not bad, and I think that we've turned it into kind of dirty words. It's only bad if we're not acknowledging it and we're
Yeah,
not using it
it's how
honorably.
it's used.
It's
Mhm.
how it's used. Yeah, it's so
And then
important. I mean, I tell
go ahead.
go ahead.
We're all into it. Like, wait a
I
minute,
know,
what
we're
is
so
this?
aligned. We're so aligned. But I tell people that all the time. I mean, you kind of shared, I'm privileged, and you gave the example of where you went to schools and your degrees. And yes, I say it all the time. I'm a Black woman, but I am privileged in many regards. I grew up in a home with two parents. I had the benefit of having a mom and a dad that were working adults, that were co-parenting, that were, providing. I saw that, and there's privilege in that.
Mhm.
So we all have to take inventory of our own power and privilege, and acknowledge it in a way that allows us to be able to use it honorably.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
the other part of that is, as leaders in organizations, it's important to look at every aspect of the way we function, all of the
Yeah.
policies, all of the procedures, all of the little hidden rules, because that's where inequities live. That's where they're nurtured. That's where they grow. And that takes work. And it takes
It does.
clear headed and honest about what those practices are actually producing.
Yeah, that's why I say that solving for inequities is a choice. You have to choose to inconvenience yourself, to
Right.
have to go into, work
Mhm.
overtime to be able
Mhm.
to discover and understand, and
Mhm.
not only to discover what they are, but also to understand the root causes. Because if we're solving for it on a surface level, we're just putting a bandage on something that's just going to
Mhm.
resurface and it's probably going to worsen over time. And we
Mhm.
don't want that. So I find a lot of the inequities just in the mentality of we've always done it this way. So I
Oh,
don't want to go
yeah.
back and revisit it. It's just
Oh.
how we do things around here.
Mhm.
Well, how you do things around here is rooted in a lot of inequities,
Yeah.
right? So, are you choosing to reimagine a different way to do it? And if not,
Mhm.
then why? Ask yourself
And
why.
that is not actually that same attitude isn't applied to the things that people think really make money. Nobody goes out there and says if Apple went out there and said what they did in 1994 was how
Yeah,
they do things, what it would be we wouldn't be paying attention to them
be
anymore.
non-existent. It'll be
Nobody
non-existent.
does that at the
Yes.
money-making point, the thing that they think makes money. But
Yeah.
he'll say that all day long around the human
Right.
beings and the people and the policies and
Yeah.
procedures that affect people,
Yeah.
unless you know that those things are connected.
Yeah, what are we valuing to decide whether or not it's worth evolving for?
Yes.
And you're right, that's not one area that the conversation ends up shifting to.
Mhm,
We need to evolve here as well.
mhm.
And again, it
Exactly.
goes back to what you alluded to before, Dr.
Mhm,
Adrian, which
mhm.
is most times it's not about that. It is
Right.
about something else that they're not
Mhm,
naming. And I'm not sure
mhm,
why, but I'm like, say it
mhm.
with your full chest so we really can get it out there and deal with it.
Yes. Say the whole thing.
Say it with your full chest, because at least now we know what we're dealing with. But right now, if you won't acknowledge the thing, then we can't
Mhm.
really talk about the thing because you're going to keep
Right,
circling around the thing because you don't want
right.
to acknowledge it, right? But the
Mhm.
thing still exists, and we know it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to go to my next question. I want to talk about how organizations effectively can implement organizational change, because that's a
Mhm,
big piece of the work, while
mhm.
maintaining a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm. Well, I have to say, make that part of the change,
Yeah,
right?
because it
So this
is.
is
It
not an
is.
add-on. So when I talk about people, you'll note if you look through my work, I don't actually use the phrase DEI or because I really hammer away at equity because I think that those are part of the pathway. Because I
Exactly.
want for anybody who comes to say this is what you're gonna get here. So if you don't want that over here, then you don't need to email me.
Then don't, yeah,
We
just
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 gonna start
don't come
right
over
here.
here.
We'll
I
start
like
right
that
here.
strategy, which
But
is
the
what we're
other
offering. So if you don't want this, I'm not about trying to defend it at every corner. Then just don't
no,
come here.
I'm not.
Yes,
But the thing about it is that this is not an add-on. This is the work. If
it
you
is
want
the work.
these results, this is part of that. So if you're not trying to get there, then then fine. You don't have to talk about diversity.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
talk about inclusion at all. If you don't want, if you're not serious. But if you're serious about getting where you say you want to go, being at the top of your field, being the number one go-to company that people want to. If you're not about doing that, then we don't have to have the conversation. But if you are, equity is in there.
Yeah, absolutely. No time to hide
Mhm.
behind, words that are not explicitly centering the work
Right,
that we do.
right.
Because I mean, we're busy. There's so much work to be done right now
Yes.
that I
Mhm,
need you to know that you know where you're going and what kind of
mhm,
help you're going to get when you come here. So I am so aligned with that philosophy. I think that it serves us all best and it helps us to avoid wasted time and
mhm,
energy.
mhm.
Because I don't know about you, Dr. Adrienne, but right now I am of the persuasion that I am no longer about trying to pull people along on a
Nope.
journey, you know? I mean, I think that for those who have dug their heels in really deeply into the sand and they're like, I'm very firm here and I'm not moving, let them stay there, if you
Yes.
will. But my energy and my time and my intellect and my ability to help provide the support that I can in my areas of expertise, it is about moving the needle. And if I can't move you from that spot, going to pretend I can. Now, I am grateful for all of those practitioners who feel like they can and they're still out there doing that
There is
fight.
a job for
That's not
everybody.
me.
There is
There's a
a
job for
role for
everybody. That's
everybody to
not where I'm
play.
planting myself. Yeah.
It's not my role. I have been asked on more than one occasion why it is kind of my target client base looks a lot like, white men between 45 and 60. Like, why are those your people? And I don't know why those are my people. They're the people who respond well to me. But the thing about it is that they're my people, but they're not the people who are walking around thinking that they are really good people who are always doing the best thing. There are people who are
Yeah.
aware enough to know
So
maybe I'm not as nice as I think I am. Maybe I'm not the good guy that I think I am. Maybe there is work for me to do, right? Maybe I haven't been competing fairly, or maybe I have, right? There's a group of people in every subgroup who wants to move. Right now, in this
yes.
part of my life and my career, I've done a lot of other things in my life, but I started this business, quite frankly, to do what I want to do. I'm willing to work with those people.
Yeah.
I have
I
so much
love it.
respect for the advocates and the activists, and I give money where I can, but that's not my place. My place is to figure out where I can move people and who are the people who want to move. And I've,
I love that.
in that spot.
I love that. That's so encouraging to hear, and I think that we need to amplify that. There are people out there, particularly even in the demographics that you mentioned, that know that they don't know what they don't know, but
Mhm,
they are interested. They desire to become better
mhm,
and to learn. And we cannot alienate those folks. We need a
right.
place and space for them to go to also be able to safely engage in the learning
Mhm,
journey.
mhm.
Because quite honestly, those are the individuals that have a lot of power and influence
Power.
right now.
Mhm,
And and honestly, it brings me to this next point, which is that, I was at a conference recently, and one of the questions, it was a conference that had a lot of like CHROs, CDOs, a lot of people that are directly centered in doing the work, right?
mhm,
And the big question came up around what's happening now in this political climate, and it was, how did we get here?
mhm,
How did we get here in the first place? How did we get here? And as I listened to all the sentiments that were shared across the room, there was so much alignment around some of the key points. And one recurring theme was that we did not, and I'm saying we in terms of just putting
yeah,
all
yeah,
of
the
these
field.
practitioners together,
Mhm,
but we did not do an effective enough job of bringing white men into the conversation so that they also felt like this was something that they needed to be concerned about, that also
mhm,
impacted them and the work that they were doing as
mhm,
leaders of all these organizations, right? Of all these
mhm.
diverse types of people. And we caused them to feel like, I can disengage because this has nothing to do with me.
Right, right.
And I think that there's something to be um, said for that. Yes,
Mhm,
right, wrong, or indifferent. I think part of our strategy going forward is to be much more intentional about how do we bring them into these conversations
mhm,
so that they have a deeper understanding, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about what DEI
mhm,
is. That's why we're hearing the didn't
mhm.
earn it. The whole merit question keeps
Yes.
coming up, and we know that that's so many inaccuracies in that.
Mhm,
And I believe that there's a lot of truth to it. So I appreciate that that's part of the audience that really resonates with your style, your approach, your
mhm,
intellect, your
mhm,
expertise, because we need folks like you, Dr. Adrienne,
mhm.
that's reaching that group and that population. So kudos and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so same way we talked about your book, I also want to talk about your podcast, the
Mhm.
Equitable, and I love it, EQUIT Able Equitable Podcast Series. And what's been so far some of your most significant insights or takeaways from your conversations with experts in the field?
Mhm. Well, I went into it with the idea that equity lives everywhere and people are putting it into place in every field,
Yeah.
in every sector. And I knew that to be true instinctively. It has been phenomenal to learn what it really looks like
Yeah.
all over the place. So, two of the conversations that really struck me, where I was just wow, 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 that's amazing the whole time, was in kind of climate justice.
Yes.
This idea
Yes.
that there are ways that people are using resources from corporations to help prevent or repair damage done by corporations in communities that have been marginalized or
Yeah. Yeah.
damaged, right?
Yeah.
So, and that what equity looks like, little things like just where trash is dumped and the zoning rules around how dumpsters can just tip in some communities, and we think the communities are neglecting themselves and not taking care of themselves when people are literally driving through and dumping trash,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that was phenomenal. The other thing that I'm learning is about how people who are in the kind of the work of providing capital for people in developing economies
Yes.
to solve problems in the kind of
Mm-hmm.
social entrepreneurship space, and the questions that folks are asking sitting around those tables deciding where money can go. that are really
Yeah.
rooted in equity, right? Are
Yeah.
you really just going to keep funding this group in India that and not the people who are actually Indian in India, right? Like, are you really
Right.
going to, and that those are conversations that are happening everywhere. And so it's really
Everywhere.
great to see that equity is something that people want to pursue in every sector around the globe.
Yep, around the globe. That is key. The global nuances of equity and how it needs to be solved for in different markets and geographies. And it also sounds like you really do center many of the conversations on bringing forth practical examples.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that's important as well, because as we
Mhm.
go back to our conversation earlier regarding the
Mhm.
complexity of the equity piece, which is so
Mhm.
misunderstood, we
Mhm.
do need to help drive home that knowledge and that clarity through practical examples of
Right.
this is what this looks like. Here's the situation,
Mhm.
and here's how individuals' markets are solving for this type of thing. So I have two more questions, and then we're going to be out of time. Unfortunately, I told you the hour is going to go by super fast. It always does. But a moment ago, we were talking about that there's some lessons learned for even us that are, practitioners in this broad space or adjacent to the work of equity, inclusion,
Mhm.
all the things, right? And as we are finding ourselves being stretched during this, very tumultuous time, it really deserves us pausing and being clear about where were there some missteps that we need to kind of refine and clean up to
Mhm.
be able to be informed and be resilient in the face of the current challenges to DEI initiatives. And so I just want to give you a chance to share with us some strategies that you recommend
Mhm.
as we're looking to upskill ourselves. I think this is a great
Mhm.
time to do that around how do we
Mhm.
now continue this work, because continuing it will also be dictated by our ability to not only be resilient, but to also be creative, innovative, strategic. We have to
Mhm.
play chess. And so, what are some strategies that you're recommending to be able to do that?
Mhm. I have two parts. One is around really just taking care of ourselves.
Ah,
And I
yes,
really am focusing a lot on Black women in particular because I get a sense that there are a lot of us involved in this work, really on the
100%.
front lines. And I know that I myself have stopped consuming news media and gotten off of social media, which is hard to do when you're trying to build a business. But I have a great firm helping me. Shout out to KQ Communications, so that I don't have to do it. And I've
Yes,
committed to figuring out how best to maximize my peace, contribute to other people's peace, and to really activate the joy that is in me and bring that
mm,
into my work. So that is one
hmm,
thing that I'm doing because it's creating much greater clarity for me
yes,
in terms when I am now looking at here's what I can influence, here's what I can change. I'm able to identify the things that I can really have an impact on better
yes.
because I'm not flailing. I am not trying to figure out how to solve all the problems of the world. Um, the second part of that is I believe in reflective practice. Believe is not even
Mm,
the right word. I know that reflective practice works. I know it because when I was a teacher, when I was a teacher educator, when I was a superintendent educator, I was like, you need to engage in reflective practice.
mm,
Down. Think about what's working. Think about what failed, not just for you, but as we were talking about earlier, but in the
yeah,
field, in the emerging field.
yes.
Because right now, DEI isn't a field really yet. It
Mhm.
kind of took off and then so
Yep.
what is working, what isn't working? Where is the place where you can have an impact, which is how I settled on my audience. Because for whatever
Hmm.
reason in my life, this group of white men are the men who've made it to where I got to where I got to. Even though
Yeah.
they were flawed, even though they had issues with race, even though we had a lot of struggles along the way, I don't get to be where I am without them. So,
Yes.
what worked there? What didn't work there? What can we do differently? But you can't do that level of clear-headed reflection if you are overstressed and overwhelmed and bearing the weight of the world.
That is so good, Dr. Adrienne. So the two things, taking care of self and
Mhm.
reflective practice. I love this idea of reflective practice. And they are very much intertwined. And I would even venture to say that part of the noise that we're hearing right now that's creating so much fear
Mhm.
is is designed to
Mm.
create fear, to get us distracted, off focus, so that we
Mhm.
can't be reflective, right? So that
Right.
we can't be level headed, so that we don't have the clarity to operate with all our faculties being able to help guide us, right?
Right.
And so, they're so intertwined. And I love the fact that this is one of the questions we're ending on, because I think that it's important for us to make sure that of all the things we talked about, that we're definitely leaning into that message. So I want to first thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for sharing with our community, for all of your insights, for the work that you're doing to help advance equity in so many different spaces and places. It's really important work. We appreciate you. And I want to thank this audience for being here with us. Hope that you'll join us again next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations podcast. But I want to give you, Dr. Adriane, the final moments to close us out in whatever way that feels appropriate to you. And particularly, maybe if there's something that's on the horizon, new projects or initiatives that you're working on that you will love to socialize, we just want to give you that chance to close us out.
What I want to share with folks is to go back to something I said earlier. In this current context, the climate that we're in, now is not the time to worry about how we talk about things. Now is the time to worry about how we do things. So, not don't talk about it, be about it. And
Talk
be
about
about
it.
it in the way that's most aligned with what you bring, and to align with people who are going to be about it in a way that's aligned to what they bring. Now is not the time to be fighting with folks who are on your side. Just because I'm not in the streets marching doesn't mean other people shouldn't be out in the streets marching. Just because I'm not somewhere writing inspirational poetry doesn't mean other people shouldn't be writing inspirational poetry. Let
Yes.
us be about our business and align with people who are about their business in ways that allow us all to move forward and protect ourselves in this context. That is what I have to offer today.
So, so good. So, so good. Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you, thank you,
you.
thank you. Your words are weighty, and I am taking them to heart. I hope this community is as well. We appreciate you. And we look forward to inviting you back for another
Thank you for
episode in the
having
future of
me. That'd
Intentional
be great.
Conversations podcast. Okay. Take
Bye.
care.